This thing live, Nicholas? We live?
I think
We
so.
live? Do I know how to do this? The question is, do I still know how to podcast after jet setting around the world to parts unknown? I let it be known that I was possibly on Tatooine at one point. I gotta tell you what, Nicholas, my fucking mouth is on fire, and I don't mean to swear so early in the program, but I smashed some tacos right before this, and I may have been a little aggressive with the Scotch bonnet hot sauce, so um, my mouth is on friggin' fire. With
Nice.
that said, this show is gonna be on friggin' fire because we're back, baby, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and listeners of all ages. Geeks Worldwide Radio and the Dork Shared Gooniverse proudly presents to you the greatest, and I mean the greatest. And let us scream it from the mountaintops, Nicholas, the greatest podcasting team in the world. He's a comic book writer, Nick Friar. I'm your friendly neighborhood backcracker, Dr. Joe. Together we are the TLDR Comic Book Club, baby. We are also the favorite, I should say, podcast of pirates because it's TLDR. Right, see what I did there? See what I did there? I came with that on the fly, baby. Just came to me.
I would say it's the first time I've ever heard of that, and I hope it fucking sticks. Jesus. I will say though, Joe, talking about being in parts unknown, if you follow us on our audio channels only, so we're talking about X/Twitter, YouTube, over when we do Instagram Live, then yeah, you haven't heard from us in a minute. But if you follow us on our audio channels, you guys have been hearing us. Like, it's almost like we were never fucking gone, because we had a conversation with Benjamin Percy. We also had obviously we did What's New, which is streamed always, but we also revealed the finalists for the Negative Space short comics competition as well. So we've still been here. We try and make it like you guys never know we're gone unless you just follow us on our video streams, which I get it. You want to watch Joe, you want to watch me, whatever your kink is, that's cool. We got no problem with that. But you should still follow us on our audio channels, because the only place you're going to find our Friar Side chats, those are conversations with creators across the industry. We don't have anything planned for spooky season because Joe and I really want to dig into some horror books, but that doesn't mean that we don't have other lines that are out there. That stuff could pop up in November, maybe December. Hell, if we get something that we have to pay attention to or have to have a conversation about in October, we're going to do it. So make sure you subscribe to our audio channels. It's Apple, Spotify, Geeks Worldwide Radio, Amazon, Pocket Cast, and wherever you listen to us, leave a 5-star rating review, or the highest rating that you can leave possible. Otherwise, you're going to learn the real meaning of backcracker. And I'll tell you what, right now, the people of Tatooine now know what that fucking means, and they are sorry about it. All right, Joe, we have been away from each other for a little bit. We are doing a mainline episode, so I'm very excited to hear about the book that you want to discuss. I'm very excited to discuss the book that I have planned. Obviously, we have the new releases this week to get to, but in terms of catching up, we're not going to go over everything since you and I last convened for our most recent What's New. But is there anything that you wanted to highlight before we get into What's New?
I still haven't read last week's books yet. And
Oh,
I had to do a mad dash to read books, this week's books, because Nicholas, I was 5 knuckles deep into this novel I've been reading, Malice, by John Gwynne. It's a fantasy novel. It's one of 4, and it is a thick some bitch. And John Gwynne is a fantastic writer. This one is more of a fantasy. You know, it's Game of Thrones ish, maybe better. I don't know. I love it. It's fantastic. He's got another trilogy revolving around Vikings that my dad loves. So like this thing was close to 700 pages. So that's all I've been reading, over the past week or so. But I'm sure next time we convene, I'll have more catching up, because there's a lot of books I still need to catch up on. But that was primarily my reading while away.
I will say, when you and I have like time away from one another, that is definitely when I am more prone to reading prose as well. But I am not as fast of a reader as you are. And I also always find myself like inching back towards reading other comics that maybe I'm not going to do on the show, but I've just been meaning to read, or just, things that I'm way, way behind on. So I did a little bit of that, but primarily the thing I did want to touch on was the Ultimates, which is part of the Marvel Ultimate Universe. And the reason being, I read issues 1 through 4, and issue 4 was a thing that was highlighted by Denise Campbell, the writer of the series, when Robert Downey Jr. got introduced as Doom, and he expressed, as a tease for the 4th issue of the Ultimates, that this may be how they introduce Doom into the MCU. Now, obviously, there's a one shot, like a what if one shot from years ago, where there was like a basically Freaky Friday situation, times 1,000 for Doom and Tony Stark. That's probably going to come into play. Obviously, Secret Wars, we've talked about the more recent Secret Wars, not the one from the 80s. That's gonna probably that's definitely coming into play. But then on top of that, we have the Ultimates. I see with the 4th issue where it's actually Reed Richards is the Doom of that universe. Still, that like what he said there, like what happens with Doctor Doom, I very much see like, okay, they could do something with Robert Downey Jr. here, and it's different than the Freaky Friday situation, but it's basically like taking another world Tony Stark and turning him into Doom. Because I think the whole thing is they've been saying he's Doom, not that he's not Tony Stark anymore. So that's another angle that they could go. So there's a few different routes. I know you're not a big fan of the whole concept in general, but I just want the people to know this is like I see the vision, and this could also work.
Yeah, my whole thing is, Robert Downey Jr. is going to kill it, right? It's not a matter of that. It's just, I don't know, like you turn the page on that chapter. That was brilliant storytelling, right? What you had with that era of the MCU, right? And the past few years have been not great, but there's great potential on the horizon, and so this was, I feel like MCU's chance to spring into something new, something fresh in the next chapter. And it's just like, and we can't quite let that go because that's our binky, that's our safety blanket. So I'm sure they're gonna knock it out of the park. It's gonna be great, but like it's more like the idea of it.
There's
That's
no
just
question
kind of
that the optics around it were just like I don't know that there was anybody that wasn't like, what? Like, even if it was like, oh, this is awesome, but like, what? Like, there's no way you weren't asking questions when they made this decision. So yeah, it's an odd one, but the Ultimates issue 4. I think you could pick it up and still like you just like understand what they're doing with that story and what they're doing with Reed Richards, and you can kind of, if you want an idea of what they might do, like I do think you can pick that up. You're not going to know. It's pretty self-contained, but there's definitely maybe like a thing or two that you can't appreciate in full. So just for the
yeah.
people who are curious, who are very like invested in the MCU, I know our listeners are primarily into indie comics, which is our specialty, which we are going to get into a lot today. Let's get into what's new though. We've been talking about Marvel. Joe, why don't you take us through all the books that we have from Marvel this week?
So speaking of the Ultimate series, we have Ultimate Spider-Man issue 9, The Amazing Spider-Man issue 58, Uncanny X-Men issue 3, X-Force issue 3, Nyx issue 3, not Stevie, just Nyx, Phoenix issue 3, Wolverine Revenge issue 2, which I've been dying to read. I just didn't get a chance to get to today. Phases of the Moon Knight issue 2, Daredevil Woman Without Fear issue 3, Wolfman by Night issue 2, Namor issue 3. A lot of third issues out today, or out this week, I should say. Venomore Zombiotes issue 2, Predator vs. Black Panther issue 2, another one I'm dying to get to. Deadpool Team Up issue 2, Star Wars Ahsoka issue 3, Chasm Curse of Cain issue 2. Next week there's going to be a ton of issue 3s as well. X-Men From the Ashes Infinity Comic issue 16, Spider-Man Unlimited Infinity Comic issue 56, The Avengers Annual issue 1, and Venomore Daredevil issue 1.
Yeah, there's a lot, and there's a lot that we're reading in that mix too. But there's a ton of books in general this week that are on our radar. There is one from DC that I want to get into, but first, everything that's coming out from DC. We got Detective Comics 1089, Action Comics 1068. You have something about DC? I mean,
yeah, this was the end of Ron V's Gotham Nocturne, right? Gotham Nocturna, right? His operatic spin on Batman and Gotham, and it was a hell of a run, a hell of an ending. And now Tom Taylor's going to be taking over. So you're going from one great writer to another. But I just wanted to mention that real quick. So
I want to
Yeah.
read this. Are you gonna talk about it on the show though? Because like we've
No,
talked.
read it. Go read it. Yeah, read it.
Okay.
Read it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Green Arrow issue 16, Titans issue 15, The Flash issue 13, Justice Society of America issue 12, Harley Quinn 43, Zatanna bringing down that. I'm sorry, I always do that. Bring down the house issue
Bringing
4,
down the house.
which this is a book that I actually fell behind on. Need to catch up on. I saw Constantine is at least in this issue. Batman the Brave and the Bold issue 17, Absolute Power Task Force 7 issue 7, The Nice House by the Sea issue 3, Power Girl issue 13, Absolute Power Origins issue 3, Batman 89 Echoes issue 5, Batman Wayne Family Adventures issue 131, Batman the Long Halloween, The Last Halloween issue 1. And then we don't often do a breakdown of one shots, but Lobo Cancellation Special issue 1 was something that was very much on my radar, not just because I have a general interest in Lobo, but Kyle Starks, friend of the show, was the writer for this. Kyle Holtz is the artist, and Dan Brown is also doing the colors. And it's always important to we always try to cite the entire creative team, but like Dan Brown's colors really give this a throwback vibe as much as Kyle Holtz's art style does that as well. In general, though, Joe, I want to talk about this because I'm really hoping that people pick this up so that we get more Kyle Starks, Kyle Holtz on Lobo because they fucking killed it with this issue. Like it was absolutely perfect. To me, if I was to describe it as brief as I could, it would be controlled mayhem. Like the violence carried weight throughout the issue. It fed into Lobo's mythos very well. There's quality comedy in all this. And also for me, who has some familiarity with Lobo, like so there were some things that you like, oh, okay, I know this about Lobo, and they're just kind of incorporating it. It works within the story, but they're incorporating it for newer readers. But it's like it's a very quick thing, and it's very accessible for new readers. It's fun for people who are familiar with it. They did a great job with this opportunity, and I really hope it leads to more Lobo for Kyle Starks and Kyle Holtz because I mean, Kyle Starks in comedy, we know like he's one of the better comedic comic book writers right now. But if we have whatever big two comedic characters there are, like Marvel and DC should be thinking about Kyle Starks every time, whether those characters are on the shelf or are highly active, because he killed it with Peacemaker. And right now, I think he can do the very same with Lobo.
Yeah, we talked about this on the solicit, right? So I love Lobo. I think he's a great character, but I just feel like he has not been written well lately. And we got a huge amount of Lobo sort of forced down our throats like a year or so ago, maybe a little long, I can't remember. And it just wasn't executed well. And I think I said, like, if anyone's going to do it, it's Kyle Starks is like a great person to do that. So I can't wait to give this a peek because especially being a one shot, boom, perfect. There's been a couple of those this week.
Yeah, move this up on. Yeah, there has. Move this up on your list, Joe, because I'm very curious how you feel about it.
This might be a catching up from for next week's episode.
Yeah, that would be great. What do we got? Let's go with Boom.
So a light week for Boom, surprisingly, but still, hell of a punch. We got Hello Darkness, my old friend, issue 3. I beat you to it. Dune House Carino, issue 6. And then we have Mighty Morphin Power Rangers / Usagi Yojimbo, issue 1. This is also a one shot. This is written by Ryan Parrott. So this was great because Ryan Parrott, he's done Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, right? That was right, and love that. It's a great these mashups are great fun series. This was weird to me though because I can't remember who the artist is, but it's not Stan Sakai, right? So I am only familiar with Usagi Yojimbo, as through the eyes of Stan Sakai. So it was seeing, this issue had a very manga sort of feel to it, the way it was drawn, but it was fun. This is a one shot. It was a fun, kick ass little book, and I hope they do more of these one shots in general. These are fun.
Sean Daly was the artist on Usagi Yojimbo Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. All right, we move over to. I enjoyed this as well. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Move over to Dark Horse, where massive week for Dark Horse.
Huge.
We got a lot to talk about with them. The books that we're actually not going to be breaking down: Anansi Boys issue 4, Critical Role, Vox Machina Origins, issue 4. The Goon, Them That Don't Stay Dead, issue 4. Patra, issue 2. Have you checked out this series yet? Because I haven't.
I haven't either.
Okay, one of us has to give it a look. Resident Evil, The Book of Life, issue 4. St. John, issue 3. Survival Street, The Radical Left, issue 1. Another title that you and I have talked about checking out in some capacity at some point. And then Masters of the Universe, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles of Grayskull, issue 1. I had fun with this.
Yeah, it's just Tim Seeley. This was, again, these are a lot of
Yeah.
fun, right? You got to go into them knowing that they're just going to be fun, right? Good stuff. And for me, this is, I think I said at the time, this is two of my favorite things as a kid growing up. I got a buddy of mine who's not big into comics, but he loves Ninja Turtles and he loves He-Man. So I'm grabbing him this book.
Nice.
Right?
Yeah, Fred Williams is great too for these he's because he did it with Tynan and the Turtles and Batman. I love his style for the Turtles.
Yeah,
big time. All right, so we have 4 books between the two of us. One is shared. Where do you want to start with this?
Why don't you start with Helen of Windhorn, issue 5?
Yeah, so this was a title that I had to catch up on because while during our little hiatus here. This is a huge issue for Helen's governess. I mean, recently there's been a lot going on with Helen. Obviously, she's the title character, but she's been going through a roller coaster ride over the last couple issues. What's really interesting for me, I feel like this issue more than any of the others, really like states how like this character Helen has evolved in ways, but at the same time, you can also make the argument that she really hasn't changed in a lot of ways either. And I don't feel like we can say that about characters all that often. Like it's one thing where we see them and they're just the same the whole way through, or we see someone go through this big character arc or whatever. But just remarkable work from Tom King in writing this series. Obviously, Bilquis Evely, like I've talked about her art style before with Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. She's been crushing it on this as well, and I really feel like her style and Matt Lopes, like they as the colorist, their work on this is just it's even more I appreciate even more for this series because of the high fantasy aspect of it. Like the Supergirl has lore to it as well, but it just feels like this story is a little more heightened in terms of the fantasy, and I think it plays into and like but also it's like on earth-ish kind of in a way, so it all kind of feels like an even better marriage than what they did with Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. So this is a book I will be talking about on the show. Very excited to do so. But the 5th issue of Helen of Windhorn, awesome stuff.
Nice. Yeah. The one of the books I want to discuss is Nightclub 2, issue 2. This is, Millar's now at Dark Horse, and they're really letting them just go buck wild. And I mean, I talked about Nightclub, the first volume on the program some time back, and was very pleased as punch to find out that it would be returning. And they took the restrictor plate off. They're just letting him do his thing. And this issue is violent. And it is an absolute wild ride, so we've got our 3 main characters, but at the end of the first volume, right, there's a bit of a falling out between the 2 male protagonists. And so the one that leaves the group, this is name is eluding me at the moment, but like this issue is heavily focused on him. And I just love when like I love good like layered characters, right? And what we get here is we get a character who is a lover scorned, who has sort of got some extra piss and vinegar running through his veins, and he decides he's gonna he knows best. He's not gonna listen to reason or whatever, and he's doing his thing, and he falls into just a classic trap. And the way that this issue starts and the way that this issue ends, it is just talk about being outmaneuvered and being too flippin' blinded by rage to see it coming, right? He just the dude gets played for an absolute sucker, and it was so wonderful to watch unfold. It's been a great return to the series, and I can't wait to see where he takes it. This was perfectly, and I don't say that lightly, this issue was perfectly executed.
It's funny because I don't know if it was last time we convened, but in one of our recent conversations for the show, we talked about how you haven't read the Magic Order and how I haven't read Nightclub, and like they're both new issues for them are both out this week. I got to get on it. You also need to get on checking out the Magic Order because the final volume is beginning this week.
Yeah, so I think we talked about these both will end relatively at the same, or the arcs will relatively end should end at the same time. So it'd be another great mainline episode of oh no, this is what we need to do. This is what it was. The next trade.
Yes.
You do Nightclub, I do Magic Order, right? That's what it should be. Yes, that's what it
That's
was.
that's what we're hoping to do. Yeah. So when it comes to the Magic Order Volume 5, the artist on this one is Matteo Buffagni, excuse me, with Mark Millar. Like I said, this is the final arc of the Magic Order, which I did not know that was going to be the case. Like I think I knew it when we did the solicit for this month, but this is a great return to this story. Of course, again, it's the first issue under the Dark Horse banner. And I talked about it on the show in full prior. This is it's a great first issue, and it's like a great start to the issue. Very unsettling start to the first issue too. On a couple of fronts, there's a character that we meet that's just like thinking about the guy now gives me fucking chills. And then the end of this issue is also friggin' outstanding. And for this being the final volume of the Magic Order, it's so fitting, like to see like this is the road that we're going to go down. It makes perfect sense too, in the with the characters that we're dealing with, and the way that Mark Millar writes, or Mark Miller writes. The stakes are always high, so like the way this issue ends, it's like there's extra weight to it. Like this is a thing that like I feel like we've seen this kind of concept like played out before, but with Mark Miller writing it, like I don't know how things are necessarily going to end, especially with this being the final volume of this series. So if you haven't read the Magic Order, like if you haven't started it, this is one of my favorite series. I know when we did our 100th episode, I don't think I had it in my list, but that's because like my list was a little bit different. But the Magic Order is absolutely must read as any series that we've talked about on this show.
Nice. So let's wrap things up here with Dark Horse, because I gotta tell you, Nicholas, what a week, right?
Yeah.
Just what an absolute week. So we have Kill All Immortals issue 3. I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times, and I will continue to say it. Not only is Dark Horse up for publisher MVP, right? Publisher of the year for me, right? But Zach Kaplan, right, is up for Writer of the Year, and Kill All Immortals is up for potential Book of the Year, right?
Mm-hmm.
I effing love this book, and I love Fico Ossio's art.
Mm-hmm.
And this, like, the first issue, yeah, it gets violent, right? Second issue, yeah, it gets violent. This issue makes those other two books look like child's play.
Mm.
I love how each issue so far has focused on Freya versus a different brother, a different member of her family, and how the outcomes always seem to be very, very similar, but they get more and more grisly. But I love the family dynamic. I love the lore, the plot. Everything about this book is just. I said it, before with Nightclub 2, how it was perfectly sort of pieced together, right? It was, this book, this series, this issue is just perfectly constructed. It's perfectly paced. It is beautiful to look at. It is exciting to read. It's just, there's a reason why I like this book stands out to me as an early front runner for Book of the Year, because it tattoos itself on your brain after you've read it.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, because thinking about it and how, like, in the things that stand out from this issue, like for me, the number one thing is the shots in this issue. Like Fico Ossio's art,
Mm-hmm.
there's so many cool poses that we see throughout so many cool action sequences in this. But then as I'm skimming back through this again, Joe, I can't help but like mention Tiago Rocha's colors in this.
Yes, thank
This
you.
is set
Yes.
in a nightclub, and everything is just popping. Everything is so vibrant. It is wild, and like we haven't. Thiago Rocha's colors have been awesome in this series, but this is a change of pace because we're dealing with Vikings, we're dealing with some old shit and everything. So it's different. Like, we're not supposed to be seeing necessarily those types of colors. Then we get it here, and then you talk about Zach Kaplan, obviously doing a great job. There, like, he's planted a seed of doubt in the back of my mind in this issue now that wasn't there, that I didn't expect to be there. So now it's just like this issue hits you on every single front, and it's awesome. I'm having so much fun with it. Like, I want to say, like, I want to describe it as epic, but I also want to describe it as fun. Like, it's a combination of the two.
It's John Wick.
Mm-hmm.
It's John Wick, right? Like, because you watch John Wick, and it's a great popcorn movie, right? But it's full of action, right? And it's so visually so well done. That's what this is, right? It is action packed. It is fun, right? It's fun in the sense, not fun in the, TMNT, Power Rangers, right? Or the He-Man, Usagi,
Right.
whatever. Sorry, whatever. It's not like fun in that sense. It's fun in that, like, oh, you're just on this fucking epic ride.
Yeah.
And it's going 1,000 miles an hour, and you're absolutely loving it. And did you catch the little Star Wars nod in the nightclub scene?
I'm okay. That's ringing a bell, but I'm not. I can't.
Yeah, I don't want to say anything more because
No, don't. Yeah,
for
definitely
those for those reading, when you see, you go, oh, okay, yeah, I get it, I get it.
Yeah.
But
Oh. Wait, I know
yeah,
now. I think there
yeah.
was another joke that I was thinking of. I don't know what it was, but
Oh no,
no.
it's not a joke. It's
Yeah.
just it was just
Yes. Yep.
yeah.
100%. Yep. That is a great call. I didn't put that together. Well done, sir. But yeah, like, Frey is an awesome character. Like, this series has everything you want. We talk, well, when we get to the mainline portion of this episode, we'll talk about, like, books being turned into movies or shows, but we don't talk about that necessarily with ongoing series all the time. But this feels like something that needs to get turned into a movie or a show. Like, this is a character that people can really get invested in, and again, like, it's a fun story. I would say movie, but
I would agree.
you still could go either way if this becomes an ongoing series. But yeah, Kill All Immortals, again, like we were saying before, this is an amazing week for Dark Horse Comics. A lot of awesome stuff coming out. I'm gonna fly through these before we get to the final publisher that we want to talk about. We got 2 books there. From IDW, we got Star Trek issue 24, Star Trek Defiant issue 19, Monster High New Scaremaster issue 2, My Little Pony: The Storm of Zephyr Heights issue 1. What? Oh, I thought you said something to say. Mad Cave. We got Dick Tracy issue 5, Defenders of Earth issue 2, Mugshots issue 3, The Last Wardens issue 3. Fuck it, wild. I'm like, we've talked like fun series, freaking crazy. Each issue is more bananas, and like I wouldn't use that term to describe any other title that's out this week. The Last Wardens is fucking bananas. Listen to our conversation with Amit from a little while back. It was fucking awesome. Revolution 9 issue 1, which we had an early look at. Definitely something you guys want to pick up this week at your local comic shop. From Titan, we got Conan the Barbarian issue 15, Doctor Who the 15th Doctor issue 3, Blade Runner Tokyo Nexus issue 3. From Distillery, we got Spectrograph issue 3, which you have dibs on. The Missionary issue 1 from friend of the show, Ryan Stegman. Very excited because
did you call dibs on this?
I mean, I did, but we had him on, and you got to look at the first 5 pages. I don't know, Joe. Like, I don't think that. I feel like that counts as me losing dibs at that point. No, it's not like with Cullen where it was Monsters Are My Business and the series was done. Like, that's a big difference.
Yeah, but it's only 5 pages, and it's not like it was a major part of the conversation. The major part of the conversation was X-Men. So you either call dibs now or forever hold your peace.
All right, if you're gonna give it, this is the kindest, the most kind you've ever been on the show. I'm taking it. I am fucking taking it.
I am well rested, so take advantage.
All right, the Missionary, I'll take advantage, is mine. One for Sorrow issue 1.
I'm golfing you this weekend, buddy. I might ride with Corey in the cart.
That's fine.
I'm not that loose.
Dynamite, Red Sonja issue 14, Lilo and Stitch. Oh, sorry, did I say One for Sorrow issue 1 from Distillery? I'm all over the place. I'm all flustered now.
You are all flustered. Jesus.
So One for Sorrow issue 1 is also up from Distillery this week. From Dynamite, I mentioned Red Sonja issue 14, Lilo and Stitch issue 7, Army of Darkness Forever issue 12, Thundercats issue 8, Johnny Quest issue 4, and then we get to Image and Skybound.
Man, there was a lot. We thought Dark Horse had a lot. Image really pumping them out this week. We have Saga issue 69, Nice.
Mhm.
King Spawn issue 38, Rogue Sun issue 22, excellent issue. Universal Monsters Frankenstein issue 2, Kaya issue 21, Spawn Kills Every Spawn issue 3, Knights issue 11, Stand Still issue 2, Remote Space issue 4, Drawing Blood issue 6, Convert issue 2, Lego Ninjago Shatterspin issue 2, Creep Show issue 1, Knights vs. Samurai issue 1, The Horizon Experiment, The Manchurian issue 1. Now, I haven't read this yet. I want to read this. This
Ooh.
is Pornchak Pachotti.
The Horizon Experiment?
Yeah, The Manchurian issue
Okay.
1.
Okay.
I'm going to call dibs on this. I haven't read it yet.
Go
I
for
will
it.
undibs it if I feel the need to, but as
Yep.
of now, I will take it.
Very nice.
We have Old Dog Operations issue 1, and then we have 2 books that we want to discuss. So, Nicholas, kick us off.
Feral issue 6. Been dying for this issue, particularly because our last conversation with Tony Fleece and Trish Fortuner, which came at the end of the first arc of Feral, they gave our listeners and us a little bit of insight as to what was coming in the 6th issue of Feral, which was kind of going to be a bridge issue in between the first arc and the second arc. And I've been dying for this issue because of the concept that they told us about, where it's going to be focused on Patch and a lot of it's going to be his POV. What I did not expect was for this issue to be absolutely fucking gut wrenching. Like, this issue was so goddamn sad, so well done. But if you've been loving the first arc of Feral, you're gonna love Feral issue 6, like no question about it. But I'll tell you what, you're not ready for, like, if you listened to Trish and Tony talk about it on the show here, you're not fucking ready for what they're about to do to you guys. Because I was just like, I read it and I was just like, God damn, man, like, you guys are already killing us. Like, this is brutal. But I will say, I want to hear what you have to say about it. But I will say there is a splash page in this issue that's fucking killer. Awesome stuff. Some of Trish's best horror artwork that we've seen so far. And now I've talked about, I think it was issue 2. I think it was in issue 2. There's an image where a cat is getting mauled by, I think it was a wolf or a dog. I can't remember. But that is an image that's really stuck with me. That's been like the one thing I think of when I think of Feral. This splash page in issue 6 is right alongside that now, because it is terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, it's what you want essentially from. I don't know. I don't want to just call this a zombie story, but because the animals are they're dealing with a virus. It's very 28 days later esque, and there's a lot of there's a lot of heart in this issue, right? And you want that, right? Because you don't want there to just be high stakes, but you want to have that connection, and especially when you're dealing with characters that aren't people, they're animals, right? So like you get that, and we spend the first arc getting attached to these characters, and then the way that arc ends, and now how we're bridging into the next one. This issue is gut-wrenching, but man, is it violent.
Yeah.
Like, you're not kidding. Trish really raised the bar on her already incredibly high bar, style and work. And there was, that not just more than just that splash page, because she really had to do something unique with the point of view stuff, and still find a way to create that tension and suspense, and she does so in some panels with just a paw sticking out. So excellent stuff.
Yeah, really. And we didn't even touch on the ending, which is great too.
No,
But like,
no.
we try not to go there as often as we can. But man, it's so freaking good. And then to end things off for what's new this week, you got Violent Flowers issue 1, which I believe you had called dibs on previously.
Yeah, because this is written and drawn by Maria Lovett, who did Crave, which is a book I'm saving for October for spooky season. I mean, these books are naughty, but they're also terrifying. And she's got a very unique art style, which I think plays really well with her storytelling. And whereas Crave was more about, it was more of an allegory of technology sort of taking over our lives and rotting our brains, and the chaos it can create. This is a story about vampires and witches and monsters and power, and the vampires age very quickly, but the second they get a drink of some plasma, as what's his name there would say, who's the vampire Spider-Man there,
Morbius.
Morbius, thank you, as Morbius would say in the Spider-Man cartoon, I need plasma, I need my plasma. So as soon as they drink that blood, they turn young again. So like, this has all the hallmarks of Maria Lovett's just great work of telling a suspenseful horror story. And this first issue did its job, pulled me right in.
Nice.
Got a little naughty, which
Oh,
okay,
boy.
I'm in. All right, you had me at hello. You sold me with, anyways. But great first issue there.
Jeez, I'm glad I'm not the one that's talk next. Okay, so we haven't done this in a little bit, but it hasn't been crazy long since our 100th episode. But we are starting on the road to 200 today, Joe. That is our next. Well, we got 150, I guess, is our next target. But we have our next set of
102 would be our nice next target to hit. To be honest with you,
that's a very good point. But I think in spooky season we could make a pretty good friggin' dent in this. But we are not getting into spooky books yet. As much as I am like fucking ready to go on talking horror books, I know the first one that I'm going to be talking about. I'll tell you after the show. But I am very excited to get into horror books. Mine might get into a little horror, but you're definitely not there yet this week. We got a pair of Image books to talk about. What are you kicking us off with issue 101?
So I remember, before we even knew what the Massiverse was, we had Radiant Black, and I talked about that book ASAP. This was the first arc was over,
Right?
and we've had Kyle Higgins on, we've had Ryan Parrott on, we've had Cherish Chen on, we've had Misty Flores on, we've had Matt Groom on, we've had Michael Busatil on, we've had we've had pretty much the entire Massiverse on our program, which means we haven't really talked many Massiverse books as mainline issues. I think Radiant Black might be the only one, unless you discussed no one, which
No,
I don't
remember
think you did.
No, I didn't.
Yeah,
I didn't because we
right.
had Kyle on the show for it.
Yeah, right. So I am pleased as punch to be able to discuss another Massiverse book on the program, and we didn't even know this was part of the Massiverse until we had Kyle on, and he told us, he goes, well, actually I wrote this book back in 2014, and this is in the same universe, and that book would obviously be C.O.W.L. C.O.W.L. This was written by Kyle Higgins and Alex Sagel, with art by Rod Reese and letters by Troy Pateri. Quick synopsis. Welcome to Chicago Organized Workers League, aka C.O.W.L, the world's first superhero labor union. While C.O.W.L once stood as a beacon of hope against an epidemic of organized crime and an unbeatable brotherhood of supervillains, the union now faces its fiercest foe yet, a disillusioned public. So this was originally 2 volumes, 11 issues, starting in 2014. And as Kyle sort of told us, when we first had him on, this book actually, even though it was written way before Radiant Black and way before anybody knew, what the Massiverse was, he wrote this book, and he's now made this part of that universe. And what I love about the Massiverse is we've talked about this. Kyle's talked about, everyone we've had on has talked about how you can read any one of these stories independently, and it has no bearing on any of the other titles. The only time that happens is the yearly one shot, the Supermassive books. But you can read these all independently, and I love that. It's such a brilliant thing to do, right? Because it's so easy to have like all these books, they're all tied in, and you're like, oh shit, I don't want to read all these books to get one story,
I've never heard you complain about something like that ever
No, God,
in my
no.
life.
And what I just love the concept of it. It's like, yeah, this story, and we live in a world where superheroes exist, but like I think a lot of times, right? What we can relate to is that like you and I, for example, we may know what's going on here in our parts of the country, but maybe we don't care. We don't give a shit. We are not tapped into what's going on in the rest of the country, right? Like we know, okay, superheroes exist here. It affects our lives here, but outside of that, whatever, doesn't affect us. We don't think about it, right? So like
Mhm.
with Chicago, right, you've got Radiant Black, right? In Louisiana, you've got Rogue Sun. In California, you've got the Dead Lucky, right? And those entities happen in their part of the world, and they don't necessarily need to cross over with anything else. We're just living in this world where you can have these wonderful stories, these wonderful characters, and they don't need to know each other except
Mhm.
for like in those brief crossovers. So I wanted to say that again, reiterate that because I just love what they've done here because they've really created this universe where you can have these things and they don't have to be lock and key with each other, which is great.
I
So
just want to say on that note, like I agree with you 100%. And like the thing that's so impressive is too, like, it's not just that you don't have to read the Dead Lucky to be able to read Rogue Sun,
bingo.
but at the same time, like when they meld them together in Supermassive, like in the few instances that they do that, and whenever they do it again, it's always very well done. It feels very fluid, very natural. So they've
Yeah,
really done a nice job with all of it. But I don't want to take away with the
because
with the
that because Supermassive will it's the only time where you'll see like editor's note. This took place in
yeah, that's right.
blank
Yeah.
blank, of issue
Yeah.
blank blank blank, right? And so
We get
like
like the tech company, which I'm blanking on the name right now. Like Morrow, we
yeah,
hear mentions of Morrow elsewhere, but at the same time, like we
it
don't.
doesn't impact the story though, right? Like, yeah, because
Nope,
they'll say like, "Oh yeah, I heard what's going on in Chicago or down in Louisiana," but that's it. It's like one line, and
yeah,
so for those of us who read it all, we know. But like, if you're just reading this story, it's like, "Oh yeah, what's going on in such and such?" It's like, okay, whatever, and you just keep
exactly.
moving on to
Very
the
easy to
story.
just be like whatever about it.
Yeah,
100%.
but anyway, so 2014 is when Cowl was first written. It's 11 issues spread over 2 volumes, and it has since returned with Cowl 1964, which is currently on issue 2, I believe. So I've read the first 2 volumes, and just just quickly, the story takes place in Chicago, 1962, right? So it's a period piece, if you will. And what I love about it, is it's got that old school comic book feel. Like this feels like a comic you might have read in the 60s without having that sort of lame old outdated, feel that you
Hmm.
might have gotten in a book back then, right? This
Yeah.
has a very Silver Age vibe to it, that Rod Reese captures perfectly, while also keeping it modern, giving it those awesome modern touches at the same time. Sort of like what Batman, the original Batman, the animated series did, right? It was that sort of neo noir kind of old school 1940s feel, right? That's kind of what we get here with Rod's, brilliant art. But what this book is, it's a wonderful political thriller. And it's got that sort of old school Chicago gangster feel to it without it being a gangster story, if that makes sense. Like you've got gangsters in this story, obviously, and they do play a pivotal part in what goes on, but it's not like you're just your basic, you know, Al Capone, Godfather type story. No, this is a story about superhero unions, which, when you think about it, doesn't sound like it would be a kick-ass comic. Like it's an original idea. Unions, and we know that unions has its its criminal element to it. Jimmy Hoffa and all. Um, but like this, no, this really is about like you know the unions. Like it's like when Major League Baseball first unionized. There's a book called The Lord of the Realms, which is about that. And I've read a 500 plus page book on the history and the origin of the Major League Baseball Players Union, and it's one of the most fascinating books I've ever read.
Huh.
Um, and so this is like that, like you've got a story where you've got superheroes that exist in this world. You have supervillains that exist, plus all the nitty gritty gangster criminal element of Chicago that exists on its own. And so you have this union that the story revolves around the union's contract being up, and they're playing hardball. The mayor and the union are playing hardball with each other because they want a new contract. They want longer years. They want more money. They want better benefits. They want better armor, right? Like shit that's like, how the fuck are they gonna, write an exciting comic on this? Like the premise is awesome. It's unique. It's original. But Kyle and Alec just do an absolutely brilliant job of weaving in this political thriller. You've got a great subplot that occurs with one of the characters that turns into a little bit more as the first arc ends and going through the second arc. And there's no real good guys, right? In this, you've got the superheroes, but I would sort of equate them to like the boys. Like this again, think of like the boys as like a modern version of this, where you've got this sort of entity that controls, that controls the superheroes. The PR is very important, right? But none of the characters, the boys, are really like, oh yeah, what a good guy that person is, right? Very similar, right? Very similar in that regard. And so, and the good guys really get shady in the second volume, right? So there are a few good, ethically, morally, how do I want to say this? Good ethical characters in this, but they are few and far between.
Sounds
But
like you're really trying to push it there. It's like
well,
they all got slick back hair. They live for New Year's Eve. I understand.
yeah, no, they're not great, but there's a couple at least that have like some moral backbone
Mm-hmm.
to them. And what's happening is that the part of the reason why there is such this butting of heads is not just one side wanting more money and the other side not wanting to give it to them. There's also this element of like, in the first arc, they got the last, bad supervillain of like this group of 6 that have been terrorizing Chicago for a long time. It's like there's no more supervillains around. Like, do we really need C.O.W.L? Do we really need these superheroes to protect us? Can't the cops just do it, right? So there's like all these elements at play, and you got the guy that runs C.O.W.L, and you talk about slopping up his steaks, guys. Whoa, and yeah, yeah. Let's just leave it at that.
Well said.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm trying not to spoiler free since 23. So what I love is that even though it's 2 volumes, right? It's one long storyline. It's one, 11 issues. It's telling one story straight to
Nice.
finish. It's not like one arc and then you get a completely separate story, second arc sort of thing. No, it's sort of one continuation. So I can't wait to read issues 1 and 2 of C.O.W.L 1964 to sort of see what that time jump was like. The whole cast of characters in here, and what I love is that like the issues sort of tell you who the characters are, at the front, at least the first pages of volume 1, and again in the first page of volume 2. So you have the Gray Raven, who is the C.O.W.L chief. He's unpowered, but he's a sharpshooter. You have Blaze, who is the deputy C.O.W.L chief and head of tactical. He has what's known as a 0-point energy gauntlet. You have Radia. She is in the tactical division, and she has telekinesis, and she can also fly. You have Arclight. Fucking Arclight. He is in the tactical division. He has flight, focus, energy blast. He's a real fucking prick. It's just
Alrighty then.
he is, he is who's the main dickhead in the boys there? Homelander. Thank you. My brain switched cheese. You know how it goes, people. I am old and defective. We have John Pierce, who's a detective. He is unpowered. The subplot revolves around him, because he's a detective, and you learn about his background and sort of what he uncovers. Really fascinating. That's some really gripping stuff there. That brings a lot of that sort of political. I mean, conspiracy sort of like, okay, what kind of shady shit is actually going on around here? You have Grant Marlowe, who's in the patrol division. He is also unpowered and a sharpshooter. And then you have Eclipse in the patrol division. He is anti-kinetic and he has power disruption. So you got a cool sort of cast of characters here, and they most lean towards the dark side of the moral spectrum, but you do have a few that are definitely on that lighter side, maybe teetering right around the middle there. But great cast of characters, and Kyle and Alec, as I said earlier, are able to brilliantly tell a story about superhero unions that is wildly engrossing and extremely fast paced, and Rod Reese's art, like I said, he gives you that sort of that Silver Age feel, aesthetic, without it feeling dated. Like a lot of those comics of that era kind of feel to us now, which is how I feel like I imagine Violet watching, cartoons of the '80s that I grew up with. Like, what the
Yeah.
fuck is this shit?
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
Real
you
quick,
know.
if I'm not mistaken, Blaze is the character from C.O.W.L that we see pop up in Radiant Black, which is also,
Oh yes,
speaking
yes,
of
yes, yes,
cartoons,
yes. Thank you.
that short cartoon that Kyle Higgins had done, where Will Friedle is the voice of
Yep,
Marshall.
yep,
Like that,
yes. Thank you.
Blaze is there. Yeah.
See, this is why we have Nicholas on the show, for that and that only. Uh,
What?
but what I also love about Rod Reese's art is that I've talked about Spider-Man life story, Fantastic Four life story, and one of the things I love about those stories and those books is, especially when you're in the '60s, when you're in the '70s, when you're the artists on those books really give great attention to detail to the decades in which the stories are taking place, and Rod it's got that vibe to it here. With this primarily taking place in the '60s, I get that life story kind of vibe to the art style here. So just
Mm,
I'm so glad that I read this, and it's funny because Rich Duick, right, who works a lot with Alex Cormack, Drive Like Hell, CSR, Rotor Bones, right. Um, I was scrolling through TikTok today, and I follow him, and he has this really his TikTok is awesome because it's like um, it's basically like he talks comics and then makes food. So like today, for example, his post was Chicago Italian beefs and cowl,
huh.
right?
How about that timing?
So absolutely like serendipity. And the name of his channel is Comic Book Kitchen. So for
Nice.
those, like, it's a great follow because he's always cooking and talking comics. It's brilliant. So I had to message him and say, like, I'm actually talking about that book today. Holy shit, right? Like, what are the odds? So
Yeah.
I cannot recommend this enough, right? And like I said, you can get if you can't find it in your comic book shops, if you have Hoopla, it's on there. I highly
Mhm.
recommend reading it. Nicholas, this is a must read for you,
Of course.
my friend. So, yeah, love the Massiveverse. All in, baby.
Yeah, nice. It sounds like we talked about with Massiverse too, like on top of it, like not everything having to be connected, but also connected. They're also each title like tackles like different genres and different types of stories. And this is this is so different than anything else that we're reading. Like
Mhm.
Superhero Union is you're not seeing that anywhere else. So awesome. Like I'm absolutely gonna be checking this out. It's a sin that we haven't talked about on this previously, and that both of us hadn't read this sooner.
It's
So very
like yeah, I was gonna say it's like those '90s, is it John Grisham, like political thrill, like the Pelican Brief with Denzel and Julia Roberts, or
huh,
it's like those, like one of those kind of like political
interesting.
thriller kind of stories. It's fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, that is also very different from the book that I am talking about today. But before I get into it, obviously, like when it comes to Massiverse, there's a lot of different shit that can be done from like a TV movie standpoint. This sounds though like, especially with the comparison you're doing to the stuff from the '90s, like this sounds like something that you would prefer to see as a movie above all else.
Yeah, because it takes place over a fairly short period of time,
Mm,
right? So like I think it would make a great movie, but I could see it being a show like Criminal. right?
Mhm.
Where like you got this
Yeah.
world now, right? So like you could deviate from like because the first two volumes are essentially one story that takes place over a short period of time. So I don't know how you would extend that out more than just a couple episodes.
Mhm.
So you know like I could see it being a movie, like, but you could have like a series. But if they did make it a show, like okay, this world exists, so you could really have fun with it, right? So it could go either way. But this particular storyline would be a movie, no doubt.
When we've talked about all the other Massiverse stuff before, as much as they're different art styles and everything, I have in reading all of those titles, I always feel like this could be cool as live action, but I'd love to see it as an animated show. I've seen this art. I'm familiar with Rod Reese's style, and obviously hearing you talk about the story, this feels like of the bunch, this is the one where it's like this is more than the others. Like should be live action,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it ends
Oh
up
yeah.
being. Yeah, like it just seems like it's too serious. I think you couldn't do it in animated, but it just doesn't seem like the right fit necessarily. But awesome. Okay, so Cowl, great stuff. Like I said, I'm talking about an image book as well, but I'm talking about a much different title from Cal, and that's Ain't No Grave. Of course, written by Scotty Young, art by Jorge Corona, colors by Jean-Francois Belleau, and then letters by Nate Picos. You guys have heard me talk about this a lot recently. I moved this up to the top of my pile because we're not quite in spooky season yet. This does get a little like spooky in some ways, but I want to make sure Joe can read this ASAP. The trade is not going to be out until December, I believe, but I hope you've been picking up those single issues, Joe, because there have been so many friggin' kick-ass covers for Ain't No Grave. This is a 5-issue series. It is contained. This is it. This is all you're getting. And I'm telling you right now, you guys are going to, if you have liked the other Scotty Young, Jorge Corona stuff, which I've talked about, I Hate Fairyland on here, which Jorge Corona is not the artist on, but Scotty Young was originally, is no longer. He's now just writing it. But you talked about Middle West, which fucking awesome. We've both read The Me You Love in the Dark, which I'm surprised you didn't do that as a mainline episode. I don't remember
I
why.
meant to. It was on my list, and
Yeah, just
just things
yeah.
happen.
To quote Matthew McConaughey. But anyways, it's like if you enjoy those 3 titles, you're gonna absolutely love Ain't No Grave. A quick synopsis on this: Ryder put her violent past behind her when she fell in love and became a mother, but that was before she learned it was all going to be taken away. Now she'll have to pick up her guns once again and ride to kill the one who's been excuse me, the one who's behind the threat, which just happens to be death. Ryder is the main character, very much focused on her throughout the story. Her old West like bandit nickname was Revolver Ridge Ryder, which love that, rolls right off the tongue. Darius is her husband. Joey is Ryder and Darius's daughter. There are other players that we see mixed in issue to issue, but those are really the 3 characters, and it's mostly about Ryder. But like with everything that you find out about her and like after what's like you Darius and Joey are more in the back of your mind above all else. We do see them popping up throughout the story, but they're like it's all about Revolver Ridge Ryder. And one thing that obviously with Scotty Young, being an artist who now primarily seems to write and then draw covers, like we know he does a great job of letting the art talk. He's done that with all his stuff that we've broken down on this show, but I do think with Ain't No Grave, he does that more than anything else because and it's really fitting for the genre because this is a Western. We do kind of bounce around with certain types of genres that get inserted into each issue that kind of alter the pace a bit. But this is a Western. Like we're dealing with a character who's like used to rob trains and banks and stuff like that. That back in the old American West. Although she could be from like her own like old West universe, and I wouldn't fucking know because just the way that the story is told, and obviously when you have Jorge Corona's art style inserted into it, it just feels like it's it is very much its own thing. But you also have a silent issue that's mixed in this series. Scotty Young has like said this to the masses. So this isn't spoiling it, but there is an issue where there is almost no dialogue in it throughout, and it's like we talk about different artists and how like their styling. It's just like creating an experience and how much fun it can be. And you and I love a range of art style, and it's only grown more and more for both of us the longer that we've done this show. And with Scotty and Jorge Corona, they have this cartoony art style that is just so much damn fun. And we talk about Trish Fortuner, who's cartoony as well, but in a different way. But seeing again, like basically a silent issue where Jorge Corona is just his art that's telling the whole story. It's just like you can read it quickly, but you also like you want to take in every single bit, and it's so damn fun. I really enjoyed that issue alone, but I enjoyed, of course, the entirety of the series. And with it all being focused on Revolver Ridge Rider, like you you find out that like she is not like okay, she's a kid and she's a former bandit. So like sure she has a kid and she's a former bandit. So like you figure, okay, so this is kind of like ain't as good as I once was, but good once as I ever was, right? To quote Toby Keith. But she's still like, nah, I'm pretty much as good as I once was. Like she still fucking kicks ass. Like she's still a badass. But at the same time, she's facing a challenge right now that is so much harder than anything else that she could have faced. And I really enjoyed getting to know her, but not, I will say, like, not everything about her is just like she's cool. Like, not everything is just she's a badass. And also, she's a mother who wants to continue being a mother. Like, she's done some pretty shitty stuff throughout her life. And we learn about some of that throughout the story. And I'll tell you what, like, I don't know how remorseful she is about any of it, Joe. Quite honestly, like it's kind of I Middle West is outstanding. The Me You Love in the Dark is outstanding. Just to focus on the Scotty Young, Jorge Corona stories that they've done together, I really enjoyed both of them. Like inhaled them when I started reading them both, and you'll do the same when you start reading Ain't No Grave. But for me, like each one is like the way like the tone is very different. Like this is dark. This is also unapologetic, and I really love the ending of this. Like Middle West is like this. Like there's so much heart in Middle West. There's so much emotion in rawness in the Me You Love in the Dark. And I know heart and emotion they can be kind of the same thing. But if you've read the two, I think you can figure out what like maybe I'm not separating them well, but like you understand kind of what I'm going for. With this, it's this is a deserved ending. This is the ending that it needs to be. It is like it is so I was really moved by it. Not in the way like I was by Middle West whatsoever. Because it's just such a beautiful ending to that story and a powerful ending. This is like, yeah, man, this is perfect. This is really well done. I love what Scotty did here. All three of these stories between him and Jorge Corona have been so much fun. And I've talked about Corona throughout, but I mean, like his like what he's able to do, man. It's just I fucking his art is so much goddamn fun. I mean, it's in every series. It feels like he's upping his game too, and he's doing so much different stuff. And I talked about like there's like a different vibe for each issue. Like it's all set in the West, but like we get a little more like we get like gunfights mixed in throughout this. We get gambling and card play mixed in throughout this. Not Gambit card play, so I don't get too excited. But it's a lot of fun. Like that's mixed in throughout this. Traveling Western type montages mixed in throughout this, which is like that's I think the one consistent not the one of the overarching consistent Western themes we see throughout the majority of the series is like those little like Western like traveling montages from Ryder, and I love them. Like I love them, and in seeing them through the lens of like of Jorge Corona's art style is different than anything you see like True Grit. Like imagine that in Jorge Corona's art style. Well, like you're seeing that here. That's what it is. Like you wouldn't see it anywhere else. So it's just I and you get a range of wild looking fucking characters too. Like there's
Love it.
different ones that get mixed in. So you're gonna have so much fun with this. Like I mentioned something else off the top of the show that you got to move to the top of your pile. The Magic Order, but you're gonna read this and you're like, fuck, man, like this is the one I got to talk about next trade.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, they're such a great team together. Middle West was such a brilliant comic, and the Me You Love in the Dark was excellent as well. So I love when you have a good team like this, and I can't wait to give it a read. Dante, let's go.
Yeah, I I don't know, like I don't want to have to rank things but I feel compelled to with these. But at the same time, no, I'm not gonna do it because I don't know because I was gonna there's of course probably some
Well,
recent surprise with Ain't No Grave, but like Middle West is might objectively be the best one, but like the other two are more
but
my
it's
vibe. Tough.
it's hard to compare, right? Because Middle West was how many issues?
18, I think.
Yeah, right. And both the Me You Love the Dark and this were what, 5,
Yeah.
right? So right, it's 3 times as long. There's more there,
Hmm.
and all three are such wildly different stories from each other, right? So you know,
You know what? Here's how we
it
solve it. Everybody, just go read all three.
there you go.
And then just tell us, like it's that easy. Like, which one is your favorite? They're all you gotta read them all. Like, if you like Scotty Young at all and you haven't read these titles, and obviously, like I hate Fairyland is fucking outstanding too. I've talked about before, but like it's just so fucking good. If it's
Yeah,
Scotty Young, man, like you and I, like those, you and I like to steal from one another. Like there's a mad dash if it's a Scotty Young title. I feel like between you and
yeah,
me, if it gets announced on Twitter,
yeah.
it's
And
so
you
good.
snaked this before I realized it was a Scotty and Jorge team up because I definitely wouldn't have let that one slide.
Yeah, I saw it on
Uh,
Twitter and I was like, "Oh, Joe's gonna take this 100%." I want to fucking read this. It looks so goddamn good. And like I haven't talked about like so when Scotty did Rocket Raccoon, like his stuff there was so fucking good too.
yeah.
I loved that. So yeah, like he's someone we haven't had on the show yet. Would love to have him on the show at some point. Same with
Agree.
Jorge for that matter as well. But
Yeah.
awesome stuff this week. Getting back into mainline, we will be having if I'm doing my math right, yeah, next week will be the start of October. So we are going to be doing a solicit to kick off spooky season.
Hmm.
But then you and I should be able to get in 3, maybe 4 scary books a piece. We never know if a Friar Side chat's going to pop up. So make sure you subscribe to the audio channels if you haven't already. Just subscribe to one, whichever your preferred podcasting platform is, because we got a lot of scary books coming up, but you never know when a Friar Side chat is going to come. You got anything else before we get going?
Yeah, I got a couple books I've highlighted here for spooky season. Crocodile Black, The One Hand, The Six Fingers, Dracula. Right.
Mm.
So there's a couple of Crave is another book, right? That could make that list. So definitely subscribe,
Ooh.
follow, because there's some good books that I potentially will be discussing for spooky season.
I got a couple of good ones too. If you're gonna tease some stuff, I mean, Somna is a distillery book that I've mentioned on the show previously, and that's fucking
That's
up.
another naughty one too, isn't it?
It is.
Maybe we'll do that in Crave and have a really
Ooh,
spooky,
we have
naughty.
to. We have to.
Right?
That's
Yeah.
great call. The Butcher's Boy, which is one you heard about previously.
The Butcher's Boy.
One that's hasn't been brought up in a long time. I got to make sure I find the final issue of this because obviously all the Scott-tober stuff. It was kind of all over the place. But the Book of Evil was fun, and I know that hasn't started at Dark Horse yet. But I think I don't want to keep pushing that one off. And it was so good, and it's very different than anything else. But you know what, Joe? Conversation for another time. The point is, we have no shortage of spooky books to talk about. I'm looking forward to it. We got the solicit first, though. Until next week, stay sexy.
And keep reading, right? Keep reading.